Now, some movies become giants, some become cult favorites, and some just hang around because they've got a certain scruffy little charm that you can't quite shake. Today, we're reviewing a sports comedy drama that never became one of the all-time heavy hitters, but it absolutely feels like the kind of movie that can get a second life with people who love 80s comfort cinema, underdog stories, and football movies with a little bit of mud on their jerseys. And honestly, that's kind of the appeal here. In this episode of Is This Still Any Good?, we're looking back at the best of times. Now, this isn't some polished, unstoppable classic. It's a little bit loose, it's a little bit shaggy, a little uneven, but it's also funny, warm, and weirdly easy to root for. So let's break down the wins, the misses, and the maybes in this relic of 80s cinema. Released in 1986, The Best of Times was directed by Roger Spottiswoode, written by Ron Shelton, and it stars Robin Williams and Kurt Russell with Pamela Reed and Holly Palance in key supporting roles. Now, the setup here is simple and also kind of wonderfully ridiculous. Robin Williams plays Jack Dundee, a man still haunted by one dropped pass from a high school football game years earlier. So he decides the only logical and sensible adult solution is to recreate the game and settle the score once and for all, with Kurt Russell playing quarterback Reno Hightower, the former local football hero who threw the dropped pass, getting pulled into all the madness with him. So right away, you know what kind of movie this is. It's part sports comedy, part small town character piece, part midlife crisis in shoulder pads, part buddy comedy, and when it leans into that combination of all of them, The Best of Times is pretty damn lovable. Now, the big thing that works here is its underdog spirit. At its core, this is a movie about regret and second chances and the very 1980s belief that redemption cures all of which serves as a strong foundation because even when the movie gets a little bit silly, it always has that emotional engine under it, that part that keeps it from feeling disposable, which does give the whole thing just enough of a pulse to connect with. What also really helps, I think, is just the random pairing of Robin Williams and Kurt Russell. They're such an odd couple on paper, which in retrospect, I think is exactly why they work in this movie. Russell feels completely at home here. He gives Reno Hightower this relaxed, grounded presence that I think makes him feel like a real small town legend who never quite left the parking lot of his own glory days. Williams, meanwhile, brings nervous energy, charm, and that familiar sense that his mind is always running a half a lap ahead of everybody else, and together I think they do give this movie its entire identity.
She's gonna leave me as soon as I fix her car.
Are you gonna fix it?
Hell no, I love her.
Because that chemistry definitely matters. This is not a movie that lives or dies on plot mechanics. It relies on personality. It lives on how these guys bounce off of each other. It lives on the feeling that one of them is trying to duct tape his life back together while the other is just trying to avoid getting drugged back into the renewed spectacle of everything. And I really do think that their scenes give the movie a rhythm that keeps it lively even when the story starts to wander. So the Russell and Williams dynamic here, to no surprise, is the secret sauce of The Best of Times. Another strength is the football itself. A lot of movies use sports like a decorative parsley. It's technically on the plate, but you're not really there for it. This one actually does get a lot of mileage out of the football angle. You get the comical training, the build-up, the ragtag personalities, the small town pride, and the very satisfying contrast between the scrappy dreamers and the polished opposition. So when the movie is focused on the game or when the stadium lights are bright, this movie is at its best.
Be careful, they got Dr. Death covering you.
No sweat. I thought he was still in jail.
He's on parole.
Parole?
On 4, ready?
This is also where I think the comedy plays the strongest, not in a broad joke delivery sort of way, but just in the way the entire town starts orbiting this ridiculous idea like it's the most important civic event since the new stoplight at the town intersection. There's just something funny about how seriously everybody takes something that's this absurd, which is sort of part of the fun. The movie understands that small town pride can be both deeply sincere and a little bit unhinged, and it gets a lot of mileage out of that concept. And maybe my favorite thing about this movie is just the tone overall. It has this low budget, lived in charm that actually does help it a lot. It doesn't feel slick at all. It feels homemade in the best sense, like a movie that knows exactly what kind of world it wants to live in and doesn't mind having some fun in the mud. So that texture does give this film its personality, because even when it gets predictable, it still feels like its own odd little football fable. Now, with all of that said, the movie definitely isn't perfect. The biggest issue for me, at least, is the second act. It starts spending way too much time on the will they, won't they relationship material. And the problem is, it's not just one of those subplots. It doubles down on them for both Russell and Williams. This does create a few stretches where the movie does lose a lot of its forward momentum and kind of starts circling instead of driving. This is when you can feel the story really wanting to get back to the game, and you're kind of waiting right along with it. There's also the issue of Jack as a character. Now, Williams is so naturally charming that he does keep the performance afloat, but the character himself can honestly be a little frustrating. He lies, he manipulates, and pushes things along in ways that makes him a lot less lovable than the movie probably wants him to be. It's not a fatal flaw because, like I said, Williams smooths over a lot of the rough edges, but I do think this does keep the movie from being able to just fully settle into that pure crowd pleaser lane. And yes, it's predictable. You can see the broad shape of this movie from pretty early on, but to be fair, predictability isn't always a crime in a feel-good 80s sports comedy. Sometimes it's just part of the contract. The question is whether the movie earns the payoff anyway, and for me, mostly the best of times does. Something else that makes this movie interesting to revisit is, of course, the Ron Shelton factor. This was written by Shelton before Bull Durham made him one of the signature sports movie voices of the late 80s and into the 90s, and here watching, you can already feel that fascination he has with sports, ego, memory, and community, and how they all kind of tangle together. And here, even before his home run swing, you can see him playing around in that mental territory. It also helps that the movie was shot around Taft Union High School, with football scenes filmed at Pierce Junior College and Moore Park High School. This gives the whole thing, I think, a very grounded California, small town texture. It doesn't feel like a glossy studio version of this world. It feels dusty, local, specific, and all of that works in this movie's favor. It gives the whole thing a little bit of extra authenticity, even when the plot is operating on pure emotional moon logic. When it hit theaters, however, the best of times just didn't break out. It pulled $2.4 million to take the number 7 spot its opening weekend, and it would top out with just $7.7 million on a $12 million budget. So this was not one of those movies that came storming out of the gate. Russell and Williams weren't exactly household names at the time either. Russell did Escape from New York and The Thing, and Williams had Popeye and was more known for his sitcom Mork and Mindy, so their names didn't quite equate to star power at the time, which I do think led to this movie quietly slipping under the radar. Now, what I think keeps the best of times alive is not that it reinvented the sports movie, because it certainly didn't. It's that it has a heart, it has personality, and 2 stars who really do make the whole thing go down easy. It's one of those movies that feels like a sort of like a cable era hand-me-down. It maybe isn't pristine, it's definitely not elite, but absolutely watchable and kind of comforting because of its flaws instead of in spite of them. I think it also works as a nice snapshot to mid-80s studio filmmaking when you can still get a modest, offbeat sports comedy built around star chemistry in a town full of eccentrics. It feels like a movie from a specific era, and sometimes that alone is part of the magic. Not every revisit has to be about greatness. Sometimes it's about rediscovering something that still has a pulse, and this movie certainly has that. So at the end of the day, The Best of Times, I think, is an imperfect but genuinely charming little underdog movie. It's got a fun premise, strong chemistry between Russell and Williams, a surprisingly solid football backbone, and enough small town personality to carry you through the rough patches.
You drop that damn thing again, Jack, your life is over. Just throw me the goddamn ball, Reno.
So for my grade, I'm going to give The Best of Times a solid 7 out of 10. It definitely has its issues. The second act does drag. Some of the relationship material does gum up the works a bit, and Jack can be a tougher hang than the movie realizes, but when it gets back on the field, both literally and emotionally, it delivers where it counts. And if you're a fan of 80s sports comedies, Kurt Russell, Robin Williams, or movies that feel like they've been sitting on a VHS shelf for 40 years, this is absolutely worth revisiting. Now that's a wrap on this review of The Best of Times, but I do have plenty of throwback movie nostalgia for you guys. If you're into this kind of retro movie revisiting, you can check out my Friday Night Rentals playlist for more 80s favorites, or you can check out my Forgotten Movies from the 80s series if you want to keep digging through the cinematic attic for more dusty little gems. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching my videos and hanging out at the channel and talking movies with me down in the comments. All of your guys' engagement really does help the channel more than you guys can realize, and I love talking movies with you guys down in the comments. It's one of the best parts of making these videos. So if you did enjoy this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hit the notifications so you never miss a new one. And until the next video, movies never say die.
Jack Burton in the Pork Chop Express, and I'm talking to whoever's listening out there.
Survive a war, you gotta become war.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
You trying to say Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?